Hello, my name is Professor John Benjamin, and this is Graphic Design 1 at West Virginia Wesleyan College. And today I'm going to show you how to create an infographic type poster for safety instructions using both Illustrator and InDesign. Okay, so here's the final poster that I'm going to create for this video. And so, but to start, let's start from scratch. So I'm going to go, and you can follow along, say File, New. And for this project, we're going to make an 11 by 17 poster, simply because that's the paper size we have in the lab and it's easiest to use. It's not a typical size for most posters, or in this case, an instructional safety infographic. But for our purposes, we're going to stick to tabloid. And we want the orientation to be landscape. Make sure that you only have one page and you don't have facing pages checked. Remember, facing pages is for multiple page publications. This is just one poster, or one page poster. And let's give it a name. I'm going to call this Subway. Great. And create. Alright, and so the first thing we want to do with most graphic design projects, in InDesign in particular, is create a grid. And so before I did this, I did some sketching, as you should. Almost never is it a good idea to simply start right in the digital environment. Your ideas will happen more smoothly and more freely with a pen or a pencil and a sketchbook. Now, this isn't a very refined sketch. I hope for you all that you'll have a bit more of a refined sketch than this. But this is the basic idea that I have, and I've dragged it in here. I took a picture with my phone. You can scan it in too. And I'm going to go ahead and sort of match the size up to my document here. So I'm going to click on the free transform tool. Whenever I want to scale in InDesign, this is the tool I want to use. And I typically just hit the E key on my keyboard to get there. Alright, so then I'm just going to go ahead and make that a little bigger. Just sort of right. Now I don't want this to move around, so I'm going to lock the layer. It's very important to have good, clean, defined layers. So I'm going to go to my layers palette. Mine's right here, but if you can't find a particular palette, just go to Window. And here's where all of your palettes are. And you can see here in alphabetical order is the layers palette. So I'm going to create a new layer. And layer 2 is where I'm going to start my other design work. But layer 1 now is where you can see it's blue, and it matches the color here. That's the layer of my sketch. I'm just going to go ahead and lock that. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is create a grid out and create guides. Alright. And so I don't want a gutter for these guides. This is not a typographic grid exactly. So I'm going to hit 0 for gutter on both the rows and columns. And here, it looks to me, if I divided this up, into about 8. So I've got 4 here, and I want this to be even, proportionally even, the top and the bottom. And this is divided into 4. So I'm going to create 8 rows. And then here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, although I want this one to be twice the width. So really what I want is 6 columns. And that seems to line up pretty good with my sketch. Not perfectly, of course. So I hit Command 0 to zoom in or to fit the whole screen. Command minus and plus will zoom in and out. But Command 0 will fit to the amount of space that I've allotted myself here. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is create some text boxes. So to do that, I can go to my text tool. And I'm going to go ahead and draw out a text box there. Now I already have my copy prepared, so I can go ahead and paste that. And let's make it a little bigger. So I'm going to hit Command A to select all. And now you can come to your Properties panel and simply increase the type size like so. What I like to do is hit Command Shift angle bracket. And that's an easy way to go ahead and make things larger and smaller. Angle brackets are the ones by the comma and the period. I don't like this typography. I want to use something sans serif. I typically default to Helvetica to start off with. So I'm going to go ahead and make a style for this. I'm going to click New Style here, and I'm just going to click in here and call this H1 and hit Return. All right, so I have a new style, and all of the attributes for this typography here now are automatically embedded into the style. But I want to make some changes, so I'm going to click here on H1 and my little pen here, and I'm going to change this to Helvetica. And I want to use a condensed black, something really has a little bit more punch to it. All right, so a few problems here. All titles should not have hyphens. Hyphens are only for running text or body text. So now I'm going to come back here and make another edit and turn that off. All right, looks like I need to make it just a little smaller because it's running off of the box. All right, so 70. I like to use even numbers. It's a good idea to keep things in proportion. And if you remember from typography, it's a title, so I want to use solid leading. So I might want to go as far down as 70 points for the leading. And that feels pretty good. All right. All right, so I need to do the same for these other bits of text. So I'm going to create a text box here. I'm going to go and select my text tool and just click and drag a text box like so. And I'm going to type the word fire in here. But I need it to be large, and I want it to be Helvetica, so everything's consistent. So I can go ahead and select fire, and then come here and select H1. But I'm going to want to control this one. I'm probably going to want to have different attributes, different variables assigned to this typeface. But I do want some similar attributes to this one. So I'm going to, now that I've attributed H1 to this, I'm going to go ahead and make a new one. I'm going to call it H2. So with that highlighted, I'm going to click on this plus button, and then I'm going to set H2, hit return, and then I can come down to H2 and then change some of these style options. And the first thing I'm going to change, I'm just going to make it a little smaller, 60 points. All right, so now I've given some styles to the text, but what I also want to do is attach some styles to this text box. Because the box, I want all the boxes to be similar as well. And I want to be able to control them with a style. So that way I don't have to keep changing all the parameters and making sure and remembering how they're all the same. I want everything to be consistent, so that's why I use styles. So there's paragraph styles for the text, and then there's object styles for the boxes, or the text frames. So I'm going to select this text frame here. I select it with my black arrow, or my selection tool. And then I'm going to come up to Window, and I'm going to go to Styles and Object Styles. And here's Object Styles. And I'm going to create a new one by hitting the little plus sign. And I'm going to double click on it. And I'm just going to call this text frame 1. And what I want to have, the style that I want to add to this text box, is simply under text frame general options here. I simply want to have the vertical alignment be in the center. And then that puts fire almost in the center. It's not quite right though. But what I can also do though, I can insert a little space to sort of bump it up. Here's another approach. So if I unhitch, make all settings the same, and I go to the bottom here, I can lift up the bottom. You can see there I've added a little space to the bottom, a full pipette, and that puts fire almost right in the center of the box, and that's what I want. All right, so now that I have this object style attached to this text box, I can go ahead and copy and paste it or duplicate it. Now there's two ways to duplicate in InDesign. You can just hit Command, Copy, Command, Paste. Okay, that's great, and then you can move it over here. But there's a quicker way to do it. I just select the box, and I hold down my Option key. And you can see when I hold down my Option key, a little white arrow appears. Now if you have a PC, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's the Alt key or the Window key. You'll have to look into that. But in a Mac, it's the Option key. And that a little indicator, the arrow changes to a double arrow, telling me I'm about to duplicate. Now I can hold down the Option key, then click and drag, and I get a second one. But what I really want to do to make things streamlined is I want to hold down the Option key and then click and drag and then hold the Shift key down. And that way it snaps, and so it will be aligned automatically with the top. All right, one last little trick. If I hold Command Option Shift D, it will simply duplicate the last thing I did. And so that just makes things a little easier. All right, so let me put the other text in here. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create these image frames. These are not text boxes, so I want to create an image frame. Now, you have two options here. You have your rectangle tool and your rectangle frame tool. The frame tool is preferable, although you can treat them interchangeably. But what's wonderful about the frame tool is that it gives you this wonderful little X there, indicating where the center is of that box and that it is awaiting an image. So I find that to be very helpful. So here is my image frame, and I'm going to place my images in this frame later. But right now, this is just a placeholder. And I'm going to do the same thing I did here. I'm going to hold the Option key down, click, drag, Shift, and snap into place. And then I'm going to hit Command Option Shift D, and simply duplicate that action. Great. All right, really the last thing I need to do down here is create these text boxes. Now from my sketches, I've determined that this is going to be one text box. If I look back here at my poster, when I look at the copy for the subway emergency instructions, each of these different first responders, or these different situations you might say, they all want you to avoid pulling the emergency lever. And so I want to really call that out. And so this is going to get its own text box. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and got my type tool, and then click and drag out a text box. I'm going to size it up like here. And then I can option drag it over here and then resize it to fit in here. Now before I duplicate it though, I am going to put some text in here and then apply some. And right away I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to give this some attributes. So I'm working in Helvetica, so that's the first thing I want to do. I'm going to select this. I'm going to make it Helvetica. Actually, Helvetica bold, I think is what I'm going to work with. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and make this a style sheet. So I'm going to come up here, and just like before, I'm going to hit the little plus sign, make a new style. I'm going to call this P1, and hit return. And I don't want to add any attributes to it at this moment, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. But the next thing I do want to add some attributes is to this text frame here. So I'm going to select that, and I am going to make a new text frame, or some new attributes to this text frame here. So I'm going to create a new style, object style 1. I'm going to simply call this text frame 2. And I'm going to add some other options to it later, but right now all I want to do is I just want to center the type. So I am going to go to General Options, and down here, Vertical Justification, I'm going to change from top to center. Oh, I also want to put some padding in it, pardon me. So I'm going to insert a little space. I'm going to insert one pica on all sides. I'm going to click that so it's all around it, and hit OK. And you can see what I've done is now the text is centered in the box from top to bottom, and then there is one pica padding around this box, so it doesn't run into the text in these other boxes. Now, one thing you'll notice here, though, there is a hyphen. Now, it's debatable in this situation whether or not hyphens would be helpful, but I really avoid them at all costs unless it's a lot of running text. It interrupts reading in smaller groups of text. So I'm going to go back to paragraph 1 and change that, and just turn off hyphenation. But it does look like that looks pretty good. I'll probably need to make that text smaller eventually, but for now, that's what I'm going to work with. All right, so I'm going to hit Command 0 to zoom out, and then I can go ahead. I'm just going to simply duplicate this because this has all the properties that I want for all these other text boxes. So I'm going to just simply Option drag, and then hold the Shift key, and I'll snap into place. And then I'm going to lasso select this group of 4 boxes to save some time. So I'm going to come down here to my margin, click and drag out a lasso. They're all selected. Hold down the Option key, drag, hold Shift so it locks it in place. And then I can just simply hit Command Option Shift D to duplicate that. Great. Now I can go ahead and put all the rest of my text in here. All right, and one of the things I want to do is I want to reverse all this. So to have a little more pop for people to sort of pay a little bit more attention to it, I'm going to reverse it. So to do that, I'm going to add a black background and then change all this text to white. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the text. So I'm going to do that in my paragraph styles. So if I come here and I just start with this one, and I can bring up H1 here, and I'm just going to select H1 and come down to color, change that to paper. Same thing here, P1, change that to paper. And it's called paper because we can't print with white ink. You simply, if you want white text or anything white, you're just going to let the paper, the color of the paper come through. All right, there we have it. Now I'm going to create a black background. All right, so to do that, I'm going to create a new layer. So here I have my sketch. That's on its own layer. And I want to give the black background its own layer as well. So I'm going to hit Create New Layer. I'm going to move that layer 3 down right here. I'm going to double click on it and call it Background. And hit Return to execute. Then I'm going to go and select, and this time not a frame because I'm not going to put an image in it. I simply want a rectangle. Alright, so make sure you're on the background layer, not on layer 2. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag out a rectangle. Alright, and now it doesn't have any properties, so I am going to change the fill to black. And there we have it. Now a really handy key is the W key. So we have all of these guides and lines that are really distracting us from how our design actually looks. And if I hit the W key, then there, it just temporarily gives you a preview without all the guides. So it toggles on and off. It's a very, very helpful key, the W key. All right, so that looks pretty good. And now I'm just going to create some colors here because I want to differentiate or create grouping. Remember, this is an exercise in orienting the viewer or the user. And so I want them to be able to follow a path very quickly to the information that they need in the fastest possible way. And so I'm going to use color as a cue to create a path or a wayfinding system, if you will. All right, so to do that, I can create character styles and colors, but I'm going to skip ahead. I'm just going to select this fire here, and then I'm going to go to my swatches palette. Again, here's my swatches palette. If you don't see yours, you could just go to Window and find Color and Swatches. All right, and so Fire, I'm going to call Fire Red. Typically, InDesign gives you these standard default swatches. I like to start with those. So I'm going to go ahead and just select the formatting effects for text, not the formatting effects for container, because this is what will happen. That's not what I want. Command Z to undo. I want to change the text. So I hit text, and then I'm going to hit the red here. All right, that works pretty good. It's a pretty decent red. Now for evacuation, I want a different color. I'm going to start with magenta. Whoops, pardon me. But I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to go to medical. All right, so next I'm going to do police, and medical is green. Now the first thing, I'm looking at these 4 colors, and they have similar values. They're almost equally as bright as their cohorts. So, but I might want to tinker with them a little bit. So let's say this police, I want to make it a little darker. So I'm going to come here, and I just have to double click on this color, and then I can go ahead and change the slider. So I'm just going to up the magenta just a little bit, make it a little bit darker. And I'm going to do the same thing for evacuation. Now I feel like their value is a little closer to that of the red fire. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to do is align this text here up with this text here. So fire, so you can quickly, your eye is guided across, you know. So I'm going to go ahead and select these 4 text boxes, and I'm just going to hit that red. Same thing here. Now we'll talk about character styles later. I don't want to overwhelm you at this moment. And now you can see there's a really simple way for any user to wayfind. So they see if I'm in a fire, I can just go and read this text. I know because of color grouping that this information applies to this. All right. Oh, last but not least, do not pull the emergency lever. The most important text here. Alright, so I need it to be very big because the subway station does not want you to ever pull that lever, except in really, really rare cases. To Object, Text Frame Options. And you can see here, it tells you that Command B is your keyboard shortcut. And then I just want to change the vertical justification from center to top. Great. Alright, I like how that's looking. Alright, so now I think I'm ready to go and do my work in Illustrator. So again, to keep in mind, any printed piece really ultimately needs to be in InDesign. You need to make a PDF from InDesign, not from Illustrator or Photoshop. Those PDFs are really not ready to go to offset printing process. Where InDesign does make a print-ready PDF. It's what it's for. It's what it's made for. And InDesign is just simply better at creating consistent typography. It has more tools like object styles and paragraph styles so that everything can be uniform. Okay, great. So let's move over to Illustrator. All right, and here is the icons that I'm going to create for this project. So I'm just going to go ahead, open up a new, we're going to start again for fresh, so we're just going to say File New. Now there's different sizes, but what I'm going to do is I am going to work in the same size as my poster. So it gives me sort of a sense of proportion. So I'm going to go right ahead and select Print Options, go to Tabloid, which is 11 by 17, and I'm going to change my measurement to inches, but I want to work in picas, so I'm going to change it back to picas, and make sure that it's landscape. Great, and hit Create. All right, and now I'm going to do the same thing I did for InDesign. I'm going to bring in my sketches so I can see with what I already planned for quickly with my pencil. So I'm going to go here and drag those in here. Command minus to zoom out. Simply grab the corner with your selection tool here and just make it smaller. To rotate it, you're simply going to move your cursor to the corner and wait for this double-edged curved arrow. Now if you start rotating it, that's great, but it won't be precise. So I'm going to hit Command Z. What I want to do is hold the Shift key down, and then it'll snap to right angles or 45-degree angles. Okay, I'm going to make it a little smaller, so it sort of fits right in there. And then I'm going to hit Command. All right. Same thing as in InDesign, I'm going to go to my layers and I'm going to lock this so it doesn't start moving around. So I'm going to go to my layers panel or palette and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to lock this layer and then I can start working on top of it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is try to create a hand in Illustrator. Easiest way to do this is by using what we call the Pathfinder. So I'm going to zoom in. And then I'm going to go over here and just create a basic shape. So here's my rectangle tool. If I click and hold on that, I can get an ellipse tool, a polygon. I just want to and I'm basically going to create a finger. All right, really not much of a finger at this point. So if I zoom in, Command plus, plus, you can see I have these delightful little anchor points here inside my rectangle. Now, if I have my selection tool here, the black arrow tool, and I click on one of those and drag inwards, I can increase the roundness of the edges. So I want a fully rounded end, like almost a full half circle for my fingers. So I'm going to bring it all the way in. And there you have it. All right, so I need all the fingers. So much like in InDesign, I am going to hold the Option key down when I have my selection tool, and I'm going to click and drag, and I get a duplicate. But in the same way in InDesign and Illustrator, I can hold the Option key, click, drag, and then hold the Shift key, and that way they'll be aligned. I'm going to create a little bit of space in between the two fingers. Now, I'm going to duplicate just like in InDesign too, but in Illustrator, it's not Command Option Shift D, it's simply just Command D. And that duplicates what I have done. Okay, Command minus to zoom out a little bit. There's my fingers. I want them to be a little longer, so I'm going to lasso select. I'm going to click out here and lasso all of them. That way I can drag and make them all a little larger. I want a thumb, so I'm going to select this one and just Option drag a thumb over here. Now, a really important feature in Illustrator is called Smart Guides. So let's go and see if we can turn on our Smart Guides if yours aren't already on. And we have Smart Guides right here. Command U will toggle them on and off. What Smart Guides do is they create these automatic alignments. So right here you can see here's the center. And if I wanted to line this up with that, I would drag it up. And you can see already the Smart Guide is making sure it's staying in alignment. And then it will intersect with the center. So I know that it's perfectly aligned already. So it has these little snapping things that help me keep perfect mathematical alignment. They're really fantastic. You see that? Now, if I don't want that, because sometimes I want to have more of like an analog adjustment, if you will. I'm going to undo a little bit. So if I want to turn them off, I simply go View and turn off Smart Guides. I can also just hit Command U. And now you can see I can kind of move around a little bit more freely, a little bit more organically, if you will. For now, I want this to be precise, so I'm going to keep Smart Guides on. All right, so I've got some fingers. Problem is, our hand doesn't really look like this. So we have our ring finger, which is a little taller. I'm sorry, my index finger is a little taller. I'll make that taller. Ring finger is slightly taller, and then the pinky is slightly smaller. All right, it's starting to look like a hand. All right, now let's create the palm, if you will. To do that, I'm going to go and create another rectangle. Since I have my Smart Guides on, it'll automatically click and align with the rest of those fingers, like so. And I think that I want the bottom of it to be rounded, so I'm just going to go ahead and round all the corners. Well, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to use what's called the Pathfinder tool. This is probably the most powerful tool, in my opinion, in Illustrator. But if you select more than one object, lasso select all of them, Pathfinder shows up, right? And unite. That looks a little bit better. I'm going to zoom in because I need to drag these 2 points downward. Okay, so to manipulate anchor points, you want to go to your direct selection tool, which is the white arrow tool, or letter A. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to click on this point here, and I can change that point. That's not how I want it to change, so I'm going to hit undo. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And you can see I have a few anchor points here. So I want to move this anchor point here down. I don't want to move it just kind of willy-nilly anywhere like that. I'm going to hit undo, Command Z. I want to move it straight. So I'm going to, and to deselect, this is an important one too. I have everything selected now because I clicked in the center. So before I can go back and click on that, sometimes I need to deselect everything, and that's Command Shift A, or select and deselect. And then I can come back here and click on that one anchor. And I want it to be straight, so I'm going to hold the Shift key down. I'm going to drag and then hold the Shift, and then it snaps. It'll stay straight. All right, that's looking a lot better, looking more like a real hand. Move it down, hold the Shift key, you become down to there. Not bad. All right, I think that looks like a pretty good hand. All right, so the next thing, I've got my hand here, as you can see from the illustration. Make it a little smaller. Now I need to create my lever. The box, I'm going to have a rectangle here. I like to keep things in proportion. So let's make it the same width as the hand. Great. All right, and then down here is this little oval lever here. So I'm going to go and just duplicate this box because I want them to be the same width as well. So just Option drag and hold the Shift key down. And it's a little bit more, a little shorter. It's about that size. And it's rounded, so I'm going to go grab these corners, pull them in, just like so. All right, but it is a handle, so I need to make it so it has an outer edge and an inner edge. So how do we do that? I'm going to select this object, and in my Properties panel you can see it has a fill that's white and a stroke that's black. I want to turn off the fill, so I'm going to select this fill here, double click or click once, and just hit the little slash mark here that says fill of none. Great. And now I want the stroke to be thicker. But now notice, because the stroke is going on the inside and the outside of the path, it's now thicker than this box. So I want to simply keep it on the inside of the path. So how do I do that? I can open up my stroke panel, or I can just simply click here on stroke in my properties panel. And I have all of these really cool options. And right here is align stroke to the inside, and that's what I want. And now you can see it's all of the stroke is going inside the path. So this path is the same width now as this box. That's just what I want to happen. The other trouble now is it is just a stroke, and I want it to be a shape so I can control it a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to select this object, and then I'm going to go to Object, and here I have all my object options, and I'm going to go to Path and say Outline Stroke. And there you can see now I have an inside shape that I can manipulate and an outside shape. All right. Now this is a black shape. I want this to be a black shape as well. So I'm going to get rid of the stroke. I don't need it. Stroke of none. And change the fill to black. And the last little element for this chord is just going to be a little connector box that fits between these two. All right. And now let's make sure it's all aligned. I'm going to lasso select it. And you can see Properties is so wonderful. My align box just comes right up here. And I can just hit horizontal align. And now they're all aligned perfectly. Now, if the line doesn't show up and you want to find it, again, everything's under Window. It's right here. Now, once again, I'm going to use Pathfinder and make this all one shape. Right here, Unite. Fantastic. All right, so now I want the hand to interact with the handle, like so. But it's behind the handle. I think I'd like it to be in front of the handle. So how do I do that? There's a couple of ways to do that. You can go to Properties, already brings it up here, Arrange. You can just go to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. The other way to keep in mind is to keep things in order in your Layers palette. So right now, I can open up this, and I can see the different paths I have here. Here is this path, and here's my hand path. So I can just simply drag the hand below or above, like so. I'm going to go to Properties, and I think I'm going to make the stroke a little thicker too. So I'm going to make the stroke white and the fill black. And I'm also going to make the handle red. And then I need to make a little sign that says don't do this. So here, the rectangle, I like to keep things uniform, so if I have a particular weight here, then I'm going to use that same weight for this little crisscross. So if I click and drag that out, now I know my box there, it's about this, it's the same width here. And I've used my smart guides that helped me to do that. But see if I make it bigger, and then it'll just snap to that same width right there. All right. I can also control it more specifically over here in my Properties palette. So you can see here's the width. So let's say I want the width to be an even 3p3. And then I want the height to be an even p6. There, it's nice and even. I want it to be a little longer, so maybe I make this 6p. There we go, that looks about right. All right, so how do I make an X? Got this nice little line here. First, I'm just going to make the addition symbol, or a plus. And to do that, I'm going to show you a neat trick. I'm going to select the object. I'm going to go to the Rotate tool. You go to the Rotate tool, and first you have to determine where you want to rotate it. Do I want to rotate it on the end, like so? Or, in this case, in the middle. So I'm going to put it in the middle, and then I can rotate it like so. But I want to also duplicate it. So I'm going to center it, and then just like everything else, I can hold the Option key down, like so. And then I can just rotate duplicate. And there I have it. But it's not perfectly aligned. So let's try that again. Rotate tool, center alignment, hold the Option key down, click drag to rotate, then hold the Shift key down, and it will snap to 45 and 90 degrees. And I want it to be at 90. Perfect. All right, now I can turn that into an X simply by lasso selecting it, rotating it by holding the Shift key down so it snaps. And there I have it. So I want to say don't do this. I need to make that a little larger. Don't do this. All right, and that's how I created that icon. So now I'm going to go ahead and make the other ones. I think I'm going to show you how to make one more just to save time. I won't bore you with the same process for making the others. The ear is a good one. Okay, so I want to make an ear. And this is, say, listen to. So I like to start with basic shapes. So I'm going to go to the ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw out an ellipse, like so. I'm going to start with black. And I want to be able to see my illustration underneath, so I'm going to turn off the fill. Now, a really great tool here is you can switch foreground and background. And I'm going to do it like this, so I can see my sketch underneath and try to line it up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. Create the earlobe. All right, I think that's a pretty good ear. I'm going to select the two and use Pathfinder to combine them. Now this part isn't really working for me. This part of the ear looks pretty good. So I'm going to create a shape. I'm just going to sort of create a flattened area here. Select them, and then I'm going to use the minus front Pathfinder to chop that off. And that's looking a lot more like an ear. Command plus. It shouldn't pinch right here. So I'm going to now change to my direct selection tool. And now remember, we can manipulate these anchor points with this direct selection tool. And not only can you move the anchor point, you can move the handlebars, which control what's referred to as this parabolic curve. All right. And you can rotate them. Notice I have my smart guides on, so they snap back into a vertical position. Or you can extend them, like so. That changes the shape. All right, so I like my ear, but this is a problem down here. So I'm going to select that. I only have one anchor here and two anchor points. I'm going to zoom in, look into this a little more closely. All right, I've got two anchor points there. One of the really important parts in Illustrator, especially when we're doing like symbols and graphics and icons, is to keep the amount of anchor points to a minimum. That's really a good rule in general for Illustrator, but it really will help you in the long run. Try to remove any unnecessary anchor points. So this one's really kind of causing me a little bit of trouble, I think. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove it. All right, so how do we do that? Well, you can select it and hit delete, but that's a problem. It gets rid of the whole portion of your path. So I'm going to undo that. What I need to do is I'm going to subtract it. So you can go to your pen tool, and right off the bat I want to point out that with the pen tool you can simply add anchor points. But how do you get rid of them? Well, if you ride your pen tool over, notice that it changes to a subtract, and you can just remove them. I didn't want to do that. I'm going to undo that. All right, so I can come down here and notice that pen tool just automatically turns to a subtract sign, and that will remove that anchor point. Now, another way to do that is to simply hit the minus key or the plus key. Plus key will add, minus key will subtract. All right, so I'm going to zoom out. Now, by removing that anchor point, things did change a little bit. And now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to work on this curve of the earlobe using my handlebar. Like so. It looks pretty good. But still, I'd like this to be a little bit more of a slope and less of a jarring angle transition. So in order to do that, I need to add an additional handlebar on here. So right now we just have one handlebar that controls this curve. I can't control this curve. I can only do that down here. So I want two handlebars to work in unison. So how do I do that? If you come over to your pen tool and you click and hold, there's the anchor point tool. You can also get there with Shift-C. Now the anchor point tool will, if I click and drag, it'll add an anchor point. Now these two anchor points are not working in unison though. I think I'd like them to. All right, so then I'm going to go back to my anchor point tool, and I'm going to click and drag out together. Now you can see they're in unison. All right, it has a nice gradual slope. It looks a little more natural. And that's looking like an ear. All right, so I'm going to create this portion of the ear next. I'm going to do that by just creating a circle. Here's the ellipse tool. Now, if you click and drag out an ellipse, of course, you get any number of ellipse shapes. I want a perfect circle in this case. So what am I going to do as usual to constrain proportions? I'm going to hold down the Shift key, like so. And now I'm going to try to line it up. If I want to keep it a perfect circle, I have to keep holding the Shift key down. That looks about right. I want this to be a little thicker, so I'm going to go ahead and make the stroke thicker, like so. And I only want half of a circle. So now in that case, I'm not going to simply subtract this anchor point. This is a case where I'm literally going to delete it. So I'm going to go to my direct selection tool, click on that anchor right there, and hit delete. And now I've just got the letter C, which is similar to what I have in my sketch part, to be the same shape. Option drag, Shift rotate. Then what I'm going to do is now notice, see my smart guides are aligning everything up. So I want these two to connect. So I want to connect these two lines. How do I do that? Just simply go to the pen tool, click the anchor point that you want to start the connection with, so here for instance, and then just go and click on the anchor point that you want to connect them to. But notice what happens here. This is how you know that you're about to link them together. The little circle or little square symbol appears, letting you know that the anchor points are about to unite. And there you have it. All right, and there's my ear. There's my cat. I may have just jumped on my lap. Now, I don't want it to have these harsh edges. I want them to have rounded edges. So we're going to change that in the stroke. So I'm going to select it, go over here in my properties palette, click on stroke, and then we get all these really cool options. And here is the round cap option. That's what I want. But I also would like a round corner. You see that corner is really sort of jarring? I like to have here the round join. That's what I'd like. Great. Now I'm going to change the stroke to white. Change this to a fill of black and no stroke. And there's my ear. Okay. So I want this to be one solid shape. So instead of a stroke, I want it to be a shape. So I'm going to select the stroke, object, path, outline stroke. All right, and then if I want, I can now simply select the two, lasso select, and hit subtract. And there I have just one single shape. Very simple. All right, then I'm going to create an arrow. Very simple. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, draw out a rectangle. Now to create a triangle, what I like to do is hold the Shift key down to create a perfect square. Go to my selection tool, and simply click on an anchor point and hit delete, and then I get a triangle, pardon me. And then I just rotate it with holding the Shift key down so it snaps to 45 degrees. And there I have a nice rectangle. And thanks to my smart guides, this will line up exactly with the center there. I go on to be a little thicker. I'll realign it. And then I'm going to use the Pathfinder again. So I lasso select the two shapes, come down to Pathfinder, and there you have it. And I'd like that arrow to be red. I'm going to create the safety icon space. The safety icons are down here. I'm just going to freeform create it with my pen tool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start at the bottom, click drag out a curve, maybe hook it up here, come back, click drag, drag, come around and reconnect. And the little circle tells me I'm about to create a shape. All right, so that fire didn't really turn out exactly as I wanted to, but that's okay, because now I'm going to go in with my selection tool and I'm going to sort of tinker with these anchor points a little to make it a little bit more fire-like. In a box, I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, hold the Shift key down and drag out a perfect square. I want the corners to be rounded. And then I need this to be white, so I'm going to change the fill to white and move that inside there. Now it's behind it. So again, easiest way to do that, well, maybe not the easiest way. Just go ahead and move that rectangle below the path. There I have it. All right, so here, kind of jumping ahead, here are my safety icons that I created in a separate Illustrator file. And here's my safety illustrations that I've completed in a separate Illustrator file. All right, so let's move these into InDesign. Here are my frames, or image frames, and I'm just going to simply place those images in these frames. Now you can say File, Place, select your file, and hit Open. All right, and there it is. Now I am going to go to my direct selection tool here, and I'm going to move it to the first one. So I've got all 4 files there, so I'm going to move it. Now notice it looks very pixelated. So this is a way of InDesign saving memory, but if I want it to look like how it's going to look, I can simply go to View, Display Performance, High Quality Display. There we are. All right, that's the first one. And now what I might do, well, I should show you that you can also just simply drag in images as well. So if I go to my Finder, I go to my Safety Illustrations, I can simply drag this file right over that box, and then it'll pop in there too. And I'm going to go ahead and move it around to where I want it. So, looks pretty good. And if I want, I can delete these, simply duplicate this one. And then just go ahead and move to the icon of my choice. All right, now they're all right on top of each other, so I want to create a little space between them. All right, so there's several ways to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to change the width of them. So I'm going to select the box, I'm going to go to my Properties panel, and here I have the height and the width. So it's 16 picas wide. I'm just going to go ahead and make that 15 picas, but I'm going to unhook it from the height, so only the width changes. So 15 picas looks good, and I'm just going to do that for the rest of them. 15, 15, 15. And I think I'd like to give them rounded corners. That works a little different in InDesign than Illustrator. So to give it rounded corners, corner options. And you can see here you can change an individual corner if you want. With the key chain or the chain link shows me that they're all going to change together. I want a rounded one, and I'm going to make it about 1p6. You can kind of see it there with the preview checked. Great. Now I want to do it to all of them the same way. So I'm going to do that as an object style. So right now there's no object style, so this is the object style I like. So I'm just going to simply go ahead and make a new one, and I'm going to call it image frame. And if I select this one and I click on image frame, it gets the same rounded corners, and they're all the same proportions. All right, there we have it. I think the last thing that I would like to do to this piece is create an extra little help for the viewer by creating some rules. All right, and that'll be the last thing we do and to finish this up. So how do we create a rule? Well, we simply go to the rule tool, or the line tool as it's called. So I click on that, and then I can simply click and drag out a line. Now there's no stroke or anything attached to the line, so you can't see anything. So now I need to come down here to my Properties panel and give it a stroke. There, you can see it. Now it's also at an oblique angle, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. I want a straight line. The first thing I want to do is see my guides again and my grid. So hit the W key. Here's my grid. So I want to create a rule that goes right across this blue line. So I'm going to click drag, and now it is aligning. It's snapping to that rule. You can also hold the Shift key down, and that'll keep it. I can't see it because there's no properties, but I can select it here. And now I want to give it some properties. So let's go down here. Let's give it a stroke, maybe 3 points. Let's make the stroke white so we can see it. And in addition to, I don't want this a solid rule. I want to make it a dotted rule. So I'm going to click on stroke here, or I can come over here and then simply select dotted. It's a little too thick. Now I want more than one rule, so I need to create a style so they're all the same. So I select it. I go to Object Styles down here, create new, double click. I'm going to call this rule, or I can call it dotted rule. Right, and now any rule I make, those attributes will be applied. But I'm going to simply create 4 of them, so I'm just going to drag it to my grid, like so. That looks perfect, except I don't want the rules on top of this text here. So there's a couple of things I could do. One, I could simply make this text box black. And then simply move it to the front. There you have it. Good luck. Thanks for joining me.